Hi YouTubers, at saka good evening din po sa mga Facebook natin. Good evening everyone. Welcome again to another live streaming of tax training. And today we'll discuss to you yung continuation po ng withholding of wages natin. But before that, I would like to say thank you po sa ating mga subscribers. Maabot na po tayo ng 6,320. Oh, thank you very much. And we promise to bring you more tax information updates. And sorry po, nung last Tuesday, hindi po kami nakapag-live streaming kasi umuwi po kami ng Montalban at may inaasikaso lang po, no? Mga importante din na bagay tungkol sa office po natin. So, our topic, we will start with the discussion in section 78 sa definition po ng withholding on wages. Ito yung under chapter 13 po ng National Internal Revenue Code. Kasi sabi nga natin, ang atin pong taxation is a law, no? Batas po siya, so dapat may legal basis. Kaya yung discuss natin sa inyo dito, yung legal basis po ng batas, no? Shout out, Hari. Okay, so good evening sa mga nagwe-waiting sa atin, nagsusubaybay po sa ating mga discussions. Good evening po sa inyo. So proceed po tayo our discussions on withholding on wages, and we start with the definition of wages. Ano po ba yung sinasabi natin na wages, no? The term wages means all remuneration. No? Bakit importante na aralin natin yung wages? Kasi yung wages, dyan yung source. Dyan ini-impose po ang tax. Dyan kinukuha yung tax. No? All remuneration other than fees paid to a public official for services performed by an employee for his employer. So, pag sinabi mong wages, sweldo siya, may employer-employee relationship. No? Merong tinatawag na employer, yung nagpapatrabaho, at mayroong tinatawag na employee, yung nagpapatrabaho. Including the cash value of all remunerations paid in any medium other than cash, except that such term shall not include remuneration paid. No? So, yung wages, kung halimbawa mayroon pang ibang mga considerations na binibigay ang employer sa kanyang employee, kasama din po yan sa sa kwentada doon sa tinatawag po natin na sweldo or wages. Hari, pakipatay mo yung aircon na to, yun ang sindihan mo. Malamig. Okay. Sakit na ang tuhod. Okay, so ano po yung mga exception sa wages na halimbawa, ito sila kahit nang babayad, hindi sila subject to tax, no? And except that such term shall not include remuneration paid, yung bayad ng agricultural labor paid entirely in products of the farm where the labor is performed, no? Yung product of the farm, ibig sabihin partihan. Halimbawa, may nagpagapas ng palay, no? Yung gapasan ng palay na yon, ang bayad sa paggapas niya ng palay, yung palay mismo na inani niya, binigyan siya ng parte doon. So, di po siya kasama na taxable. For domestic service in a private home, yung mga patrabaho sa loob ng bahay, no? For casual labor, not in the course of the employer's trade or business. Ano itong mga casual labor? Ito yung halimbawa, may paggawa ka na sira na gripo, may paggawa na sira na mga halimbawa mga gamit sa bahay, no? So casual labor, hindi siya permanent. So hindi rin po kasama. For services by a citizen or resident of the Philippines for a foreign government or an international organization. So hindi rin po kasama yung pagtrabaho sa foreign government. Okay. So if the remuneration paid by an employer to an employee for services performed during one half or more of any period of not more than 31 consecutive days constitute wages. Kaso lang, kahit na sinasabi na natin na casual labor na, pero kung umabot na siya ng 31 days, no, mapa-classify na din siya na wages, no? All the remuneration paid by such employer to such employee for such period shall be deemed to be wages, no? So salary na pag more than 31 days na. But if the remuneration paid by an employer to an employee for services performed during more than one half of any such payroll period does not constitute wages, then none of the remuneration paid by such employer to such employee for such period shall be deemed to be wages, no? So yung sabi na natin na 31 days na, more than one half na. Payroll period, ano po ba yung sinasabi natin na payroll period? The term payroll period means a period for which payment of wages is ordinarily made to the employee by his employer, and the term miscellaneous payroll period means a payroll period other than a daily, weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, or annual period, no? So yun po yung tinatawag na payroll period. Depende yan sa frequency o sa length of time na napagkasunduan ng employee at saka ng employer. Employee, the term employee refers to any individual who is the recipient of wages, siya yung tumatanggap ng sweldo, and includes an officer, employee, or elected official of the government of the Philippines or any political subdivision, agency, or instrumentality thereof. The term employee also includes an officer of a corporation. Kasi may mga officer din po sa corporation na employee din sila, no? So kasama. Sino naman tong employer? The term employer means the person for whom an individual performs or performed any service of whatever nature as the employee of such person, except that, ito yung exception, if the person for whom the individual performs or perform any service does not have control of the payment of the wages for such services, the term employer, except for the purpose of subsection A, means the person having control of the payment of such wages, no? So yung employer ang may control doon sa sweldo ng kanyang empleyado. At saka siya din yung may control kung paano gagawin ng empleyado ang trabaho, no? So in the case of a person paying wages on behalf of a non-resident alien individual, foreign partnership, or foreign corporation not engaged in trade or business within the Philippines, the term employer means such person, no? So, yung employer, yun yung nagpapasweldo, no? Yun yung pinagtatrabahuan. Okay, so, Section 17.9, Income Tax Collected at Source. So, anong ibig sabihin na collected at source? Saan ba nanggaling yung sweldo? Saan ba nanggagaling yung pambayad sa services, no? Kasi kung saan yan nanggaling, limbawa sa employer-employer relationship, nasa employer ang sweldo, siya ang nagpapasweldo. So sino ang itinakda ng gobyerno na dapat mag-withhold o magbawas ng tax doon sa sweldo? Yung employer, no? Mandatory po yan. Ang employer ang designated as withholding agent to withhold taxes coming from the salary of his or its employees, no? So yung employer, siya yung may obligasyon na mag-withhold ng withholding taxes doon sa salaries ng mga empleyado. Kasi bago niya i-remit, bago niya bigay yung sweldo ng mga empleyado, bawasin muna niya yung tax para doon, and then sa kanya i-remit sa BIR yung na-withhold niya na taxes, no? Okay, requirement of withholding. Except in the case of minimum wage earner, as defined in Section 22H, H of this code, every employer making payment of wages shall deduct and withhold upon such wages a tax determined in accordance with the rules and regulations to be prescribed by the Secretary of Finance upon recommendation of the Commissioner. So, tax paid by recipient. If the employer, in violation of the provisions of this chapter, fails to deduct, hindi nag-deduct yung employer, and withhold the tax as required and under this chapter, and thereafter the tax against which such tax may be credited is paid, the tax so required to be deducted and withheld shall not be collected from the employer. So, hindi na i-collect sa employer. But the subsection shall in no case relieve the employer from liability for any penalty or addition to the tax otherwise applicable in respect of such failure to deduct and withhold. So, hindi na withhold ang employer. Sino mape-penalty? Ang employer, hindi po ang employee. No? Kasi sino ang may responsibilidad para mag-withhold? Ang employer, hindi po ang employee. May shoutout na, Hari?
Meron na po, ma'am.
O sige.
Shoutout po kay Miss Caron G. Good evening daw po.
Karen?
Caron.
Carol?
Caron G.
Caron?
Ako.
Okay, so good evening po. Shout out Miss Caron G. Thank you for watching.
Tsaka po, good evening din daw po sabi ni Fuji Nadre.
Okay, so shout out din Fuji Nadri. Good evening. Thank you for watching. Okay.
Sila pa lang po yung
Sige. Okay, so refund or credits, no? Dito na tayo sa employer. Okay. Employer, when there has been an overpayment of tax under this section, refund or credit shall be made to the employer only to the extent that the amount of such overpayment was not deducted and withheld hereunder by the employer, no? Kung may overpayment. Okay. Employees, the amount deducted and withheld under this chapter during any calendar year shall be allowed as credit to the recipient of such income against the tax imposed under Section 24A of this title. Ito yung income tax on compensation, no? Refunds and credits in cases of excessive withholding shall be granted under rules and regulations promulgated by the Secretary of Finance upon recommendation of the Commissioner. Ano itong mga refund and credits? Ito po yung mandatory na pinapagawa po tayo ng year-end adjustment so that the amount of tax due sa employee is equals to the amount of tax withheld, no? Kaya 0-0 siya dapat. Kasi kung may sobra, may kulang, dapat binabalik po sa employee, no? Sino nagbabalik? Ang employer. Any excess of the taxes withheld, halimbawa nag-over withholding yung employer, any excess of the taxes withheld over the tax due from the taxpayer shall be returned or credited within 3 months. So, dapat ibalik niya yung over withholding or credited within 3 months from the 15th day of April. Refunds or credits made after such time shall earn interest at the rate of 6% per annum starting after the lapse of the 3-month period to the date the refund of credit is made. Nag-over withhold yung employer. So, kailan ibalik niya yung over withholding niya within 3 months or i-credit niya doon sa withholding tax liability naman ng employee. No? Halimbawa, December 31, may over withholding yung taxpayer na 1,000. So, dapat hanggang March, pwede pang i-credit yan ng employer or ibalik niya or i-refund niya. After March, no? Tapos na yung dapat na over niya ng December. After March, at hindi pa niya na ibalik, hindi pa niya na credit, hindi pa niya na i-refund doon sa employee, yung excess na withholding na yan, hindi niya binigay sa employee, will earn interest of 6% per annum. Sinong tatanggap ng interest? Yung employee, kasi para sa kanya yung pera na yun na hindi binigay ng employer. No? Refund shall be made upon warrants drawn by the commissioner or by his duly authorized representative without the necessity of counter-signature of the chairman, Commission on Audit, no? Or the letter's duly authorized representative as an exception to the requirement prescribed by Section 49, Chapter 8, Subtitle B, Title 1 of Book 5 of Executive Order Number 292, otherwise known as the Administrative Code of 1987. No? So yun yung Administrative Code. Kasi dati, wala pang mga special law yung mga agencies, puro Administrative Code po yung sinusundan. No? Letter D. Withholding on basis of average wages. No? The Commissioner may, under rules and regulations promulgated by Secretary of Finance, authorize employers to estimate the wages which will be paid to an employee in any quarter of the calendar year. Ano yung estimate? Estimate lang, no? Hindi siya yung tax due equals tax withheld. Pwedeng over, pwedeng under. No? Number 2, determine the amount to be deducted and withheld upon its payment of wages to such employee during such quarter as if appropriate average of the wages so estimated constituted the actual wages paid. Number 3, deduct and withhold upon any payment of wages to such employee during such quarter such amount as may be required to be deducted and withheld during such quarter without regard to this subsection. No? So, pwede na ang withholding i-base mo sa average wages in a quarter, no, of the calendar year. So every 3 months. Non-resident aliens. Wages paid to non-resident alien individuals engaged in trade or business in the Philippines shall be subject to the provision also of this chapter. Why? Kasi yung non-resident alien individuals engaged in trade or business in the Philippines are taxed like the resident citizen. No? Ito na yung letter F. Ito yung year-end adjustment. And meron po tayong video, no, sa tax training on how to make a year-end adjustment. No? Yung annualized method. Kasi po nagawa ka na ng year-end adjustment, i-annualize mo po yung total salary for the year, i-deduct mo yung mga non-taxable na income, and then compute mo na yung tax due, and then i-deduct mo yung total tax withheld during the 11 months, no? Para alam mo na kung may sobra pa or may kulang. Yung kulang na withholding, to make it equal, tax due equals tax withheld, kung kulang yung withholding mo, mag-withhold ka pa for the month of December. Pero kung halimbawa naman yung na-withhold mo ay sobra-sobra na, so pagdating ng month of December, instead na mag-withhold ka pa, mag-refund ka na. No, yun po yung requirements talaga. I-refund mo yung sobra, ibalik mo yung sobra. So year-end adjustment on or before end of the calendar year. No, kailan yung end ng calendar year? December 31. But prior to the payment of the compensation for the last payroll period, bago ka magbayad ng payroll period mo, last payroll period. The employer shall determine the tax due from its employee on taxable compensation for the entire taxable year. Yun yung annualized, no? Yun yung nasa video po natin. Kaya kung gagawa kayo ng year-end adjustment nyo, tingnan nyo yung ating mga recorded video na year-end adjustment. Marami po tayong samples doon. Shall determine the tax due from its employee on taxable compensation income for the entire taxable year in accordance with Section 24A. No? Yun yung compensation. The difference between the tax due from the employee for the entire year and the sum of taxes withheld from January to November shall either be withheld from his salary in December of the current calendar year or refunded to the employee not later than January 25 of the succeeding year. So, kailan po yung deadline para i-refund mo yung na-over withheld mo from January to December? The deadline is January 25. No? Pero sa experience ko, ang karamihan ng mga employer, pag may overpayment na sila or over withholding na sila, nasa pag-iusapan na lang yan, no? Kasi anong problema po ng ibang mga employers? Ang sabi nila, paano pa kami makapag-refund sa employee? Nandun na yung pera, na-remit na namin sa BIR. O wala na sa amin yung pera. So in that case, some of the employer, nag-uusap sila ng kanilang employee. Ano yung usap na yan? Na yung over withholding, i-carry over nila. So na next month, halimbawa, na over withhold siya ng December. Pagdating ng January, yung over withholding na yun, hindi na siya i-deduct ng withholding kung hindi yung i-apply doon sa withholding niya for January, yung over withholding niya noong December, no? So pwede po 'yan. Pero in that case, withholding on compensation lang, hindi pwede yung ibang klase ng withholding, ha. Yun lang kasi ang purpose niyan is year-end adjustment, no? So, kung halimbawa nag-overpayment yung employee, the next na payroll period, hindi na siya i-withhold ng employee. So, yung iba, ganun yung usapan ng employer at saka employee. Yung iba naman, pag may pera yung employer, nire-refund niya, tapos yung over withholding, ina-apply niya sa the following year, no, na payment. Okay, wala pang question?
Wala pa po ma'am. Shoutout lang po.
Okay.
Shoutout daw po kay Ran Verdan.
Okay, so shout out po kay Ran Ferdan. Thank you for watching. No, kung may mga tanong po kayo, sasagutin po natin yan along the way, kahit hindi po related sa ating topic, basta about taxation po.
Sabi po ni Vanya Anika, good evening daw po ma'am. I love listening to your lectures. Thank you for your service.
Thank you po. Shout out kay, anong pangalan?
Vanya Anika.
Vanya Anika, thank you. Thank you for watching also, no? Love na natin tong lecture eh. Kaya actually nag-aayos kami ng lecture room natin doon sa Montalban para pag nag-weekend tayo doon at pag may ginagawa, pwede rin po tayo doon. Kahit mga pre-recorded videos po natin, pwede natin magawa doon, no? Okay. So thank you po. Thank you for watching. So, sa Facebook natin.
Sa Facebook po, good evening daw po sabi ni JC Dasilio.
Okay, so shout out Jessica Casillo sa Facebook naman.
Tsaka good evening din daw po sabi ni Roda Salvia.
Okay, shout out na Miss Roda Salvia.
Tsaka nagtatanong po si Pops Dada kung may certificate daw after the webinar.
Sang webinar yun? Yung sa free bookkeeping?
Baka ito ma'am.
Ay, ito po, wala po. Live streaming lang po ito talaga sa ano natin, sa ginagawa natin. Pero wala po itong certificate, pasensya na po. Kasi wala tayo yung kagaya ng sa Zoom, nagbibigay kami. Yung sa free bookkeeping, nagmo-monitor po talaga kami doon. May attendance sheet at saka pre-registered. Ito po kasi parang public service lang po.
Okay na po.
Okay. Okay, so tuloy po tayo ha. Okay. So, ito yung next natin na pag-usapan. Ito yung liability ng employer, no? Tsaka yung employee. Ano ba yung mga obligasyon nila? Kasi pareho sila may obligasyon, no? Hindi lang yung employer ang may obligation to withhold. Ang employee may obligation din. Ano yun? Magbayad ng withholding, no? So, employer. The employer shall be liable for the withholding and remittance of the correct amount of tax required to be deducted and withheld. Sino ang may obligasyon? The employer. So, kung hindi nag-withhold, sino ang mape-penalize? The employer, hindi po yung employee. No? So, if the employer fails to withhold and remit the correct amount of tax as required to be withheld under the provision of this chapter, such tax shall be collected from the employer together with the penalties or additions to the tax otherwise applicable in respect to such failure to withhold and remit. Kaya, ang yung mga hindi nag-remit na mga employer noong 2017, nakasama po sila sa amnesty. Ano yung pinagawa sa kanila? I-remit, i-remit lang nila yung withholding na hindi nila na-remit, wala ng penalty. Kasama yun po yun sa amnesty. Pero ngayon, ng 2018, 2019, 2020, wala pong amnesty ang withholding. Kaya, magkano ang penalty pag hindi ka nag-remit on time? 25% surcharge, 12% interest per annum, at saka compromise penalty. So, tatlo ka agad yung penalties mo, no? Pag hindi ka nag-remit ng withholding tax on time. Okay. So, letter B, employee. Where ano naman po yung liability ng employee? Where an employee fails or refuses to file the withholding exemption certificate. Dati ito kasi may exemption certificate pa na nire-require, no? Ngayon wala na because of the 250,000 na zero rate sa compensation, no? Sa tax due, sa tax rate. So, certificate or willfully supplies false or inaccurate information thereunder, the tax otherwise required to be withheld by the employer shall be collected from him, including penalties or additions to the tax from the due date of remittance until the date of payment. On the other hand, excess taxes withheld made by the employer due to failure or refusal to file the withholding exemption certificate or false and inaccurate information shall not be refunded to the employee but shall be forfeited in favor of the government. So, halimbawa naman yung may pagkakamali o pagkukulang yung empleyado, no? So, kung may over-withholding dyan, hindi na ibibigay sa kanya. Anong gagawin? Forfeited na siya in favor of the government, no? So, yung mga filing ng tax exemption certificate, yung requirement noon na may personal exemption, na may additional exemption, wala na po ngayon yun. Na-lump na sila doon sa first 250,000. Ano yung mga dating exemption for married? No? Magkano yun? 32,000. And then sa additional exemption for qualified dependent children, not more than 4, 25,000 each. No? So, wala na po ngayon yun. Kasi kung itotal mo yon, yung 4 na anak at 25,100 lang, no? And then yung sa married individual 32,000, so magkano lang yun, no? 132 as against sa libre ngayon na 250,000. Kaya bumaba ang bayad talaga sa income tax, no? Filing of return and payment of taxes withheld. So, nag-withheld ka na, paano mo siya i-remit ngayon sa BIR? So, the filing of return and payment of taxes withheld under Section 81, except as the Commissioner otherwise permits, taxes deducted and withheld by the employer on wages of employees shall be covered by a return and paid to an authorized agent bank. No? So, kasama siya doon sa ginagawa natin na withholding tax return, no? And then, ang proseso dyan, gagawa tayo ng withholding tax return, and then, pa-compute po natin sa officer of the day, pipirmahan nila yung computation, saka mo palang pwedeng bayaran. No? The return shall be filed and payment made within 25 days from the close of its calendar quarter, provided, however, that Commissioner may, with the approval of the Secretary of Finance, require the employers to pay or deposit the taxes deducted and withheld at more frequent intervals in cases where such requirement is deemed necessary to protect the interest of the government. No? So, may power po yung commissioner na higpitan o iksian, no? Yung pagbabayad ng withholding or pagre-remit ng withholding. No? So the taxes deducted and withheld by employers shall be held in a special fund in trust for the government until the same are paid to the said collecting officers. No? So, yung may mga collecting officers, no, na nangongolekta po ng taxes, no? Saan yan ilalagay? Sa special fund, no? In trust for the government. Okay. So let's now go to the filing of return and payment of taxes withheld, no? Except as the commissioner otherwise permits, taxes deducted and withheld by the employer on wages of employees shall be covered by a return and paid to an authorized agent bank, collection agent, or the duly authorized treasurer of the city or municipality where the employer has his legal residence or principal place of business, or in case the employer is a corporation where the principal office is located. So saan po siya ipafile? Sa principal place of business, no? So anong gagawin niya? Magpa-file siya ng return and then bayaran niya sa authorized agent bank. The return shall be filed and the payment made within 25 days from the close of its calendar quarter. So yun po yung deadline, 25 days from the close of calendar quarter. Provided, however, that the commissioner may, with the approval of the Secretary of Finance, require the employers to pay or deposit the taxes deducted and withheld at more frequent intervals. So, di ba, every quarter, pwede niyang gawin na every month, no? Mas frequent. So, in cases where such requirement is deemed necessary to protect the interest of the government. So the taxes deducted and withheld by employers shall be held in special fund in trust for the government until the same are paid to the collecting officer. So dapat may nakadeposit sa special fund yung pera na nakolekta from the withholding. Okay.
May question na tayo.
Okay, sige.
Question po ni Mary Claire.
Sige, question po coming from Mary Claire.
What about po for employees who have been employed more than one employer for current year,
Okay.
but fails not to submit 2020 to 3164 form? What are the responsibilities or obligation of the present employer?
Employer?
Opo.
Ang employer po, mag-withhold siya ng tax based doon sa binigay mo na certificate of withholding coming from the previous employer. Why? Kasi pag may previous employer ka, magbibigay ka ng certificate dapat sa current employer mo para i-compute niya ngayon yung tax due equals tax withheld kasama na yung previous mo na sweldo coming from your previous employer. So kung hindi mo siya binigay, hindi na isama doon yung income mo. So kung hindi na maisama yung income mo, anong mangyayari? Bumaba yung babayaran mo. Meron kang underpayment of taxes. Why? Kasi pag hindi mo isinama yung previous na income mo, nasa mababang bracket ka lang. Pero kung binigay mo yon, nang iba sana yung bracket, mas mataas yung babayaran mo na tax. So in that case, since hindi mo ni-report, hindi ngayon magre-reconcile, kulang yung income mo na binayaran, no? So kung kaso lang seldom naman nag-o-audit yung sa mga employee, no? Ang karamihan na ino-audit ng BIR yung sa business, no? Pero kung halimbawa kasama kayo doon sa employee and then ma-audit yung employer nyo, then may chance po talaga na ma-penalty kayo. Meron pa?
Meron pa ma'am, galing naman po kay Sir John Bola Rufo.
Okay, so Sir John.
Sabi niya ma'am, yung application ng section 34A sa compensation, specifically on the computation of bonuses. Ano po effect ng section na ito on accruals on bonuses?
Accruals and bonuses. Sa accrual po kasi sa, at saka sa bonuses natin, di ba ang ginagawa dyan, karamihan is once a year lang yan, no? And then meron tayong, anong tawag dito, meron tayong exemption sa bonuses na up to 90,000, no? So, ang gagawin siguro ninyo, isama nyo na yung mga bonuses kung may excess pa doon during the annualized or sa year-end adjustment. Pero doon sa monthly, sa monthly payroll lang po kayo mag-withhold based on the withholding tax table. O, hindi nyo na po siya isama. No? Kasi may exempt naman siya na 90,000.
May kasunod pa po yung tanong niya, ma'am. Sabi niya, may SC ruling on the withholding of the tax on compensation based on the approval. The problem po kasi is that the approval is based on estimated bonus.
Estimated pa lang kasi hindi pa talaga definite or hindi pa na-determine kung magkano. Kaya nga ang BAR, di ba nagbigay siya ng exemption na 90,000. So, since estimated, posibleng mag-adjust ka talaga pagdating sa year-end adjustment. Doon ka talaga mag-actual na. Kasi actually, itong withholding natin na ginagawa sa compensation, hindi din naman to accurate, no? Kaya nga pinapa-year-end adjustment tayo kasi kung i-apply mo talaga yung table, mag-over withholding ka pagdating ng year-end, no? Kaya yung sinasabi mo na estimated lang na accrual, tingnan mo rin kung aabot siya ng 90,000 kasi kung hindi, exempt din naman.
May kasunod pa po yung ma'am, sabi niya po, the actual payout is done after year-end.
Okay.
Kung under withheld kasi based on estimate, may penalty kasi additional remittance. Mahirap po yung year-end computation kasi may adjustment pala.
Yun nga po. Kaya ano, sa BIR pa talaga ako, alam mo ang pag nag-lecture kami sa year-end adjustment, hindi ko ina-advise na mag-year-end adjustment po pag December na, no? Ako ina-advise ko talaga yung taxpayer na pagdating pa lang ng October, mag-year-end adjustment na kayo. Bakit? Kasi kung malaki pa yung kulang ng withholding o kaya malaki pa yung i-adjust nyo, minsan yung employer, pagdating ng December, halimbawa, wala na siyang sweldo. So, sino mag-aabono? The employer, no? Kaya, nasa ano na po ninyo yan? Nasa inyo na yan. Kasi hindi naman din bawal na mag-early year-end adjustment ka, no? Depende na yan sa nakikita ninyo na problema sa office nyo. Pwede naman na November pa lang, pwede ka na mag-year-end adjustment to anticipate na may magka-crop up kang problema pagdating po ng December.
Next question, ma'am, galing po kay Vanya Anika.
Okay.
Ma'am, kung yung company po nag-employ ng bookkeeper,
Okay.
yung fees po ba ay dapat less na of tax sa professional fees? Or pwede rin po ba na yung bookkeeper na lang magbayad ng tax niya para gross ang receipt ng fees?
Ay, hindi po pwede na ang bookkeeper ang magbayad ng tax niya, hindi po pwede. May tinatawag po tayo na batas sa withholding at sino po yung dapat magbayad? Yung kliyente. Why? Kasi yung pinambayad mo sa bookkeeper, kinlay mo yun na expense. So tingnan mo ngayon ang BIR, napakahigpit pagdating sa expenses. Kailangan may withholding, no? So lahat. Lalo na yung bookkeeper kasi services yan, no? So dapat mag-withhold ka. At saka hindi na siya basta na ordinary services na subject to 2%. Ano siya, professional siya, no? Kasi specialized na services yan. Kaya hindi siya pwede doon sa 2%. Doon siya sa professional. So magkano yung withholding doon? Iba ang rate, mas higher. 5% pagka 3 million and below, and more than 3 million, 10% pagka individual, no? Kasi pagka corporation, iba naman.
Wala na pong question, ma'am, pero shoutout po kay Ma'am Fe Herrera.
Sipag.
Congrats daw, ma'am, sa 6,000 subscribers.
Ay, salamat, Miss Fe, no? Congrats din sa business mo na napakasipag mo, no? The Golden Lady. No? Yung Golden Lady natin sa tax advisors group natin, no? Ano na naman tayo ulit, ha? Magta-tax update na naman tayo, Miss Fe, sa 27 ba yon, ano, Hari?
Opo, ma'am.
Yung ating schedule, no? Half day din yan, via Zoom po yan, no? So, siguro kasama pa na rin ulit natin na i-discuss dyan yung year-end adjustment para doon sa iba na hindi pa nag-year-end adjustment, no? Kasama natin i-discuss.
Okay na po.
Okay, so sa return and payment in case of government employees. So ito ang masaklap pagka government ang withholding agent, may provision dito na ang officer ang magbayad ng penalty, no? So if the employer is the government of the Philippines or any political subdivision, agency or instrumentality thereof, the return of the amount deducted and withheld upon any wage shall be made by the officer or employee having control of the payment of such wage or by any officer or employee duly designated for the purpose. So, yun yung requirement of withholding, ang dapat na mag-withheld ang may officer in charge, no? Okay. Statement and returns. Okay. So, for the statement and returns, sino po yung required, no? Requirements, every employer, no? So, wala sinasabi dito na may exemption sa employer, no? So, every employer required to deduct and withhold a tax shall furnish to its such employee in respect of his employment during the calendar year on or before January 31st of the succeeding year, or if his employment is terminated before the close of such calendar year on the same day on which the last payment of wages is made, no? A written statement confirming the wages paid by the employer to such employee during the calendar year and the amount of tax deducted and withheld under this chapter in respect of such wages. So yun yung BR Form 2316, no? Yun yung certificate of withholding tax on compensation, no? So the statement required to be furnished by this section in respect of any wage shall contain such other information and shall be furnished at such other time and in such form as the Secretary of Finance upon the recommendation of the Commissioner may be, by rules and regulations prescribed, no? So dapat nagbigay ka na ng certificate, no? January 31st. Okay. Okay, so letter B, annual information return. Every employer required to deduct and withhold the taxes in respect of the wages of his employees shall on or before January 31st of the succeeding year submit to the Commissioner an annual information return containing a list of employees, the total amount of compensation income of its employee, the total amount of taxes withheld therefrom during the year, accompanied by copies of the statement referred to in the preceding paragraph and such other information as may be deemed necessary. This return, if made and filed in accordance with rules and regulations promulgated by the Secretary of Finance upon recommendation of the Commissioner, shall be sufficient compliance with the requirement of Section 68 of this title in respect of such wages, no? So ano itong annual information return po na pinapagawa, no, in respect of the wages of employees, no? January 31st of the submit to the Commissioner annual information return containing a list of employees. So ito yung alpha list, no? Alphabetical list of employees. Ano yung nakalagay doon? The name of the employer, employee, the TIN, and then yung compensation niya, and then yung tax withheld, no? In detail. So kung ano-ano yung nakalagay sa annual alpha list ng company which pertains to the income of the employee, ganon din yung certificate na 2316 na binibigay sa employee, magtatali po sila doon. Okay, kasi bakit? Kasi requirement yan ng BIR pagka na-audit yung income tax return mo, may mga claims ka doon na salaries and wages, then Yan po yung ipapa-reconcile. No? Extension of time, the Commission understands rules and regulations as may be promulgated by the Secretary of Finance may grant to any employer a reasonable extension of time to furnish and submit the statement and returns required under this section. No? So, pwedeng magbigay ng extension, no? Ang commissioner, no? Provided yung pagbibigay na yan ng extension may justifiable cause, no? May reason. So tapos na? Okay. So let's have a 5 minutes break. And then pagbalik po natin, meron kasi tayong VAPP, no? So unahin muna natin yung VAPP. Kasi kung unahin natin yung revenue regulations na 11-2018, hindi po natin siya matatapos, no? Tatapusin natin to siguro hanggang next week nito. So unahin po natin yung revenue regulations 21-2020. Ito po yung voluntary assessment and payment program, no, for the taxable year 2018, no. Pero sandali lang po ha, ano lang muna. Break tayo ng Okay, so let us now discuss yung revenue regulations natin na number 21-2020. Ito po yung voluntary assessment payment program for taxable year 2018 under certain conditions. Ano po yung purpose nitong voluntary assessment and payment program po ng 2018? Ito yung parang amnesty na rin to na hindi ka na ma-examine, magbayad ka ng certain amount, no, may basis para hindi ka na ma-examine, no? Ano po yung purpose nito? Tulong to puto sa atin sa mga taxpayer na nahirapan na instead of i-undergo sila ng tax audit, binigyan sila ng voluntary assessment na i-avail and then hindi na sila mas subject to tax audit and investigation, no? May nire-require lang na minimum, no? So, ano yung policy dito? It is recognized that the country is currently battling against the coronavirus disease. Ito nga yung sagot doon sa nangyari na pandemic para hindi masyadong mahirapan po yung mga taxpayer, no? Which has caused global health emergency and resulted in severe economic and social ramifications. No? So it has led the government to implement various programs to help alleviate the suffering of our fellow countrymen and to respond to the needs of critically impacted industries heavily affected by the pandemic. So daming na apektuhan, no? So in order to sustain this program, extraordinary measures are necessary to fulfill the governance funding requirements during these unprecedented times, no? So ito yung ginawa ng BIR, gumawa po siya ng voluntary assessment payment program for the taxpayer, no? Okay, so anong coverage po nito? 2018. The regulation apply to all internal revenue taxes covering taxable year ending December 31, 2018 and fiscal year 2018 ending on the last day of the month of July 2018, no? And to June 2019. Yan yung coverage ng amnesty. Yung calendar year December 31, 2018, yung fiscal year ending June 2019, no? So including taxes on one-time transactions, kasama din po yung estate tax, donors tax, capital gains tax, as well as the on-it-related creditable withholding tax, expanded withholding tax, and documentary stamp tax. No? So kasama din po siya sa pwedeng i-avail natin ng amnesty. No? Dito sa mga one-time transactions, instead na magbayad tayo ng napakalaking penalty, no? Something like 5% na lang yung babayaran natin, napakalaking tipid. No? So any person, natural or juridical, including estates, trust, liable to pay internal revenue taxes for the above specified period due to inadvertence or otherwise erroneously paid his or its internal revenue tax liabilities or failed to file tax returns, pay taxes, may avail of the benefits under these regulations except those falling under any of the following instances. So, pwedeng mag-avail, no, ang taxpayers ng 2018, lalo-lalo na yung hindi pa na subject to investigation. Pero ano naman po yung hindi pwede, no, na mag-avail dito? Actually, meron tayong isang question nung nakaraan, no, na yun daw bang wala siyang income tax return ng 2017, 2018 lang pwede daw bang mag-avail, no? Anyway, wala namang sinabi po dito na pag wala kang 2017, hindi ka pwede mag-avail. Pero wala din siyang sinasabi na pag walang 2017, pwedeng mag-avail, no? Silent lang yung provision on that case, no? So, sino po yung hindi pwedeng mag-avail dito po sa Voluntary Assessment and Payment Program po ng BIR? Letter A, those taxpayers who have already been issued a final assessment notice or FAN, no? Final assessment notice. Ito yung under audit na siya, may letter authority, and then issuehan na siya ng final assessment notice. That have become final and executory on or before the effectivity of these regulations. Kailan po yung effectivity ng regulations na to? This is dated August 18, 2020. No? So, letter B, persons under investigation as a result of verified information filed by a tax informer. Yung mga may denunciation, no? Na may mga tax informer na hindi mo binayaran yung tax mo, naka-file na po yan sa tax fraud sa National Office. So, hindi din po siya kasama. No? Those with cases involving tax fraud filed and pending in the Department of Justice or in the courts. No? Ito yung mga na-file na po, yung mga tax evasion cases na nasa court, nasa Department of Justice na, saka nasa ordinary courts. Hindi din po sila kasama. Those with pending cases involving tax evasion and other criminal offenses under Chapter 2 of Title 10 of the NIRC of 1997 as amended. No? So, Section 4, period of availment. Qualified persons can avail of the benefits of the VAPP until December 31, 2020. So, malapit na, no? October na tayo ngayon, November, December. Section 5, conditions for the availment and processing of application. So, ito naman po yung mga conditions and availment ng processing. So, mandatory requirements. Ano po yung mga requirements na i-require dito? Letter A, duly accomplished application form, VAPP form number 2119. I-discuss po natin yan mamaya how to fill it up. Annex A, original for the large taxpayer office, RDO, and duplicate for the taxpayer. No? And then payment form, VAPP form number 0622, Annex B with proof of payment, original for the LT office or RDO, and duplicate for the taxpayer, and triplicate for the collecting agents. No? Additional requirements: filed tax returns, proof of payment of taxes paid in 2017 and 2018, and audited financial statements for the covered taxable year for those availing of the program under Section 9A. No? And then letter D, copy of remittance returns and proof of payment of final uncreditable withholding taxes for taxpayer availing of the program under Section 9B. Ano po yung program under Section 9A? Ito po yung mga taxes ng income tax, percentage tax, no? Yun namang sa mga unit, no? Anyway, isa-isa na nating explain yan mamaya under 9A, 9B, hanggang 9C, no? 9C, yun yung mga one-time taxpayers, no? Okay, one-time na transactions, no? Okay. Letter E, copy of duly paid BR Form 0605, stamped either by the authorized agent banks or revenue collection officers duly signed by the LT office RD or RDO where the taxpayer is registered, and proof of payment representing settlement of previous deficiency tax with or without an assessment notice, if any, covering the taxable period under Section 3. Bakit po nire-require ito? Kasi kung may binayaran ka na deficiencies, anumang tax na yun, isasama pa siya doon sa basis, no? So, letter F, duly accomplished on-it tax return, yung mga one-time transactions. BIR form numbers 1800, ito yung donor's tax. 1801, ito yung estate tax. 1706, ito yung sa mga creditable withholding tax. 1707, yung capital gains. 2000 OT, ito yung one-time transactions na doc stamps. And then the 0619E, no, sa withholding, and corresponding document requirements for transaction of taxpayer availing of the program under Section 9C, yung mga one-time transactions. Okay. The voluntary payment as directed in the BIR form number 0622 or payment form should be in cash as a condition to avail of the privilege under these regulations. So, kung cash siya, hindi kasama yung mga tax credit, no? Non-cash mode of payments such as tax, debit memo, and the like will not qualify as a valid payment. Kasi amnesty po ito at ang purpose niyan is for the government to raise revenue or to raise cash, no? Kasi itong mga TCC na to, parang accounts payable na to ng BIR, no? Kasi inisyo na nila. Okay. The duly accomplished BIR form number 0622 shall be presented for payment to any BIR authorized agent bank or revenue collection officer under the LT office RDO having jurisdiction over the taxpayer except for audit involving the sale of property, which must be filed or paid with the AABs or RCOs under the RDO covering the location of the property. Kasi iba po yung batas pagka nagbayad ka ng capital gains ng property, no? Or yung transaction mo related to property. Kasi registrable properties po yan. Kung saan located ang property, hindi kung saan registered yung taxpayer. Doon ka magbabayad. No? Separate application must be filed in case of the availment is under non-audit section 9A and 9B and on it wherein the same taxpayer is registered in an RDO different from the RDO having jurisdiction over the place where the decedent is domiciled at the time of death or where the donor is domiciled at the time of donation or where the property is located. So, posibleng 2 beses kang mag-apply at magbayad kasi kung marami kang transactions na one time and then meron pa rin yung sa mga regular na taxes, no? So, magkabukod sila na ipafile. Especially kung yung location of property mo located in a different RDOs. Okay. The requirements from items A to F above can be filed personally or through courier service with the LT office or RDO having jurisdiction over the taxpayer. So within 30 working days from receipt, the RDO officer will evaluate the application payment form and other documents submitted and will endorse the same to the Assistant Chief LT Office Assistant Revenue District Officer for review and the Chief LT Officer or Revenue District Officer as the case may be for approval who shall affix his signature on the BIR form number 2119. No? So pagka-approve na, bayad na, pirmahan na yan ng RDO. So on the other hand, if the review reveals deficiencies or defect in the availment, the approving official shall notify the concerned taxpayer through the email address provided in BIR form number 2119 and shall require the taxpayer to rectify the defects and or comply with pay the deficiencies within 10 working days from receipt of the notification or email. So failure to act and or pay the required amount on the part of the taxpayer within such period shall result in the denial of the application. No? So, pwede ma-deny yung application mo pagka hindi mo nabayaran yung amount. No? Issuance of the certificate of availment. Meron po tayong sample mamaya na ipakita sa inyo. No? Shall be issued by the concerned office, whether large taxpayer or RDO, within 3 working days from the approval of the application. The certificate shall serve as proof of the taxpayer availment of the VAPP, compliance with the requirements and entitlement to the privilege granted under this regulation. So, yung certificate of availment, yun na yung pinaka-proof na nag-avail po yung taxpayers. No? Sino pipirma niyan? The large taxpayer or the RDO, no? Yung district. Consequence of non-submission of the documentary requirements and or submission of erroneous or incomplete falsified information under Section 7 of these regulations. Non-submission or submission of erroneous or incomplete falsified information concerning the VAPP shall not entitle the taxpayer to avail of the privilege under these regulations. No? So, kung non-submission, no? hindi pwede mag-avail. The voluntary payment may be applied against any deficiency tax liability for the taxable year 2018 in case of audit and investigation. So, anong mangyayari doon sa binayad mo kung hindi ka nang qualified? I-apply na lang yun sa deficiency tax mo pag na-audit ka. No? Kasi definitely, kung hindi ka na qualified to avail of this voluntary assessment program, isa-subject ka sa audit, no? So, kung may nabayad ka na, then yung nabayad mo na yan, i-apply na lang doon sa audit mo. Treatment of invalid or availment deviation or defective availment, no? So taxpayers whose availment is found to be invalid, deficient, or defective are not entitled to the privilege under this regulation. So if you are not entitled, you will be subjected to tax audit. However, they may apply the voluntary payment made against any deficiency tax liability for the taxable year 2018 in case of audit or investigation. No? Section 9, amounts to be paid for availment. The amount of taxes to be paid as a condition to avail the privilege under this regulation shall be determined. No? Ito yung papaano i-compute na po itong voluntary assessment and payment program. No? Letter A, so ito yung letter A na sinasabi kanina, ito yung para sa income tax, value added tax, ito yung mga regular tax types po ng taxpayer na nandyan sa kanyang certificate of registration. Ito yung may mga frequency of filing, regular po na pinafile. No? So, kasama na yung percentage tax, excise tax, documentary stamp tax, and the DST, no? Other than DST on audit. Hindi kasama yung doc stamps na one time. No? So, anong basihan? The increase or decrease in the total taxes due from 2017 to 2018. No? So, kung ang result niya, ang net increase is not more than 10%, then how much yung amount of voluntary tax payment. So, ito yung whichever is higher, between 3% of 2018 gross income or 7% of 2018 taxable income. Pero meron po siyang minimum amount, no? For individual estates and trusts, 75,000. For corporation with subscribed capital of more than 50 million, ang minimum po niya na babayaran is 1 million. With subscribed capital of more than 20 million, up to 50 million, ang babayaran po is 500,000. With subscribed capital of more than 5 million, up to 20 million, ang babayaran po 250,000. With subscribed capital of 5 million and less, 100,000 po ang babayaran. Other juridical entities, including but not limited to cooperatives, foundations, general professional partnership, the minimum is 75,000. No? So, paano pa kinocompute? Net increase of more than 10% up to 30%, the amount of voluntary payment, the rate is 2% of 2018 gross sales or 6% of 2018 taxable net income, whichever is higher. No? If the net increase is more than 30%, then the amount of voluntary tax payment is 1% of 2018 gross sales or 5% of 2018 taxable net income. Okay, so yun po yung rate. Increase yun, no? Increase. Halimbawa naman nag-decrease. Net decrease of not more than 10%, the rate na availment is 4% of 2018 gross sales or 8% of 2018 taxable net income. If the net increase naman is more than 10%, then 5% of 2018 gross sales or 9% of 2018 net taxable income. So yun po yung minimum. Anyway, meron naman tayong example, no? Ano yung example natin? The amount to be paid must be the higher amount in column B, but in no case should be less than the amount in column C, no? So yun ang basihan, yun ang pilian mo, whichever is higher, no? So total taxes due in 2017 and 2018 for purposes of the above schedule refer to the sum of all tax due per return, no? So in all tax due per return kasama na yung income tax, percentage tax, is ano ba yun? DST, no? And net VAT payable before deducting any creditable withholding tax, quarterly payment, or advance payment. Gross sales and taxable net income shall be based on the annual income tax return for the taxable year ending December 31, 2018 and fiscal year 2018 ending on the last day of July 2018 to June 2019. So, yun yung coverage ng ating voluntary assessment and payment program, no? Ito na yung illustration natin or yung example para mas madali siya maintindihan, no? Computation A, a VAT-registered entity engaged in the manufacture of cigarettes, no? Subject siya sa VAT, no? With a subscribed capital of 15 million, had the following taxes due per tax return filed pertaining to the fiscal year ending April 30, 2018 and April 30, 2019, no? Tax types, fiscal year ending April 30, 2018 and fiscal year ending April 30, 2019. Okay, so income tax, 2018, 300,000, 2019, 405,000. Value added tax for 2018 is 200,000, for 2019, 220,000. Excise tax for 2018 is 300,000, for 2019, 250,000. The total tax due ng regular tax niya is 800,000. Yun namang April 30 na total, lahat ng tax due niya is 875,000. So, paano pa i-compute yung payment? If gross sales and taxable net income for fiscal year ending April 30, 2019 amounted to 22 million and 1,350,000 respectively. So if Corporation A will avail of the benefit of the VAPP, it has to pay the amount of 660,000 computed as follows. 660,000. Why? Kasi yun yung higher. No? Number 1, compute for the percentage increase in the total taxes due from fiscal year ending April 30, 2018 to fiscal year ending April 30, 2019. So, ang total is 875,000 minus 800,000 divided by 800,000, no? Para makita natin yung increase or decrease. So, increase is 9.375%. Since the increase is not more than 10%, determine the higher between 3% of gross sales and 7% of taxable net income, no? So, letter A, 3% of 22 million equals 660,000. No? Ano yung 22 million? Yun yung gross sales. No? 7% of net income naman ito. 1,350,000 equals 94,000. So, whichever is higher, the higher amount is 660,000. So, yun po yung dapat na bayaran ng taxpayer. The minimum amount for a corporation with a subscribed capital of more than 5 million but not more than 20 million is 250,000. So, higher pa rin yung 660,000 na 3% po ng sales. Okay, so compare the amount per item 2C against the minimum amount required. The amount to be paid to avail of the VAPP for the tax above is 660,000. No? Okay. In cases where any non-audit tax deficiency covering the taxable period under Section 3 has already been paid, the basic deficiency tax, ito binayaran na yung deficiency. Basic deficiency tax paid shall be added to the tax due, idadagdag sa tax due of the applicable tax returns for 2018 in computing the amount of voluntary payment required under Section 9A, provided that such payment did not arise from the cases excluded from the coverage of the VAPP under Section 3. So, mayroon pong example. Ito example, illustration 2. In addition to the facts provided under illustration 1, assume that Corporation A was issued an electronic letter of authority, ELA, for VAT covering the taxable quarters ending July 31, 2018 and October 31, 2018. So in July 2020, before the effectivity of these regulations, Corporation A was issued a final assessment notice or fund covering said ALA with the following amounts. No? So ito yung details. Basic VAT law, the amount is 300,000. Surcharge, 75,000. Interest, 115,000. compromise penalty 25,000, total taxes due is 515,000. Okay. So if the corporate A settled said fund, its settlement can be considered as an additional, no? Additional payment of taxes pertaining to the fiscal year ending April 30, 2019 as follows. So ito po. Tax type, no? Fiscal year ending April 30, 2018, fiscal year ending April 30, 2019, no? So income tax for 2018, 300,000. For 2019, 405,000. Value added tax is 200,000 for 2018, 520,000 for 2019. Excise tax, 300,000 for 2018, 250,000 for 2019. No? So how much is the total taxes due? 800,000 for 2018 and 2019, 1,175,000. Okay. Computed as 220,000 VAT paid per return plus 300,000 basic VAT due per settled fund. No? So, if Corporation A will avail of the benefits of the VAPP, it has to pay the amount of 250,000 computed as follows. Yung 250,000 na bayaran niya pag gusto niya mag-avail ng amnesty. Voluntary assessment program. Okay. Sige, ito na tayo. If the Corporation A will avail of the benefits of the VAPP, it has to pay the amount of 250,000 computed as follows. Number 1, compute for the percentage increase. No? So, magkano yung percentage increase? 46.875%. Bakit? Taxes due, fiscal year ending April 30, 2018 to fiscal year April 30, 2019. So, 1,175,000 minus 800,000 divided by 800,000 equals 46.875%. No? Since the increase is more than 30%, kaya 46 siya eh, determine the higher between 1% of gross sales and 5% of taxable net income. No? So 1% of 22 million, yun yung gross sales, equals 220,000. 5% of 1,350,000, ito yung net income. So the equals 67,500. So it's ever higher, so higher ang 220,000. So that's the amount na dapat bayaran. No? The minimum amount for a corporation with a subscribed capital of more than 5 million but not more than 20 million is 250,000. So compare the amount per item 2C against the minimum amount required. So compare mo yung 250 at saka 220,000. No? The amount to be paid to avail of the VAPP for the taxes above is 250,000. No? Kasi yun po yung higher. Okay. For final withholding tax on compensation, friends benefits, and creditable withholding taxes other than creditable withholding tax on it, the amount to be paid shall be 5% of the total basic withholding tax remittance to the for the taxable year 2018. No? Okay. May question?
Meron po, ma'am.
Sige.
Dahil po kay Irish na, magkano po ang annual income na individual subject to income tax?
Annual income subject to dapat lalagpas siya ng 250,000 para maging taxable siya. No? Kasi yun yung 250,000 exempt eh, no zero rate. So dapat more than 250,000.
Yun lang po yung tanong.
Okay. So for final withholding taxes on compensation, friends, benefits, and others, and creditable withholding taxes under the creditable withholding tax or on it, the amount to be paid shall be 5%, no, of the total basic withholding tax remittance for the taxable year 2018. No? Ito yung illustrations o ito yung examples. Company B has remitted final and creditable withholding taxes, withheld taxes for the calendar year 2018. No? So in the amounts of 45,000 and 200,000 respectively. If Company B will avail of the benefits of the VAPP, it shall pay the amount of 12,250 computed as follows. No? Final withheld taxes remitted, 45,000. Creditable withheld taxes remitted, 200,000. No? So total amount remitted, 245,000 multiplied by 5% equals the total voluntary tax payment required, na 12,250. No? For purposes of VAPP, availment under Section 9A and 9B, taxpayers must apply for all registered taxes indicative therein in order to avail of the privilege set forth under Section 10. For taxpayers with claims for tax credit or refund, they shall constitute a waiver of such claim. May waiver ng claim. Under Section 12, hereof, unless they exclude in the availment the respective tax type for which they are pursuing the claim for tax credit or refund. Okay, so we have discussed yung 9A at saka 9B. Now let's go to 9C. No? So for taxes on it, such as estate tax, donor's tax, CGT on it related, CWT, expanded withholding tax, and DST, the amount to be paid shall be the basic tax due of the unfiled tax return or unpaid tax due plus 5%. No? Ito yung sa mga one-time na transactions. No? So, illustration, Mrs. Cruz sold her lot located at Cavite in August 2019. No? The area sold contains 350 square meters with applicable zonal value of at the time of sale of 3,000 per square meter. No? And fair market value per tax declaration in the amount of 800,000. No? The CGT and corresponding DST, dog stamps, capital gains, were not paid in 2018. No? Hindi nabayaran. If Mrs. Cruz will avail of the VAPP, she will pay the amount of 82,687.50 computed as follows. No? So ito na. For the capital gains, 3,000 per square meter multiplied by 350 square meters equals 1,050,000. So multiply by 6%, 63,000. Add 5%, 63,000 times 5%, 3,150. No? So yun yung total, 66,150. Documentary stamp tax, 1,050,000. Yan yung selling price niya, no? 1,050,000. Over 1,000 times 15 equals 15,750. Add 5% of 15,750 equals 787.50. So how much now is the total? 16,337.50. No? So total voluntary tax payment required 82,687.50. No? So yun po yung how to compute. No? Section 10 privilege, no audit. No? So pag nag-avail ang taxpayer, no audit. A taxpayer with a duly issued certificate of availment shall not be audited for 2018 for the tax types covered by the availment. So, hindi na siya examine ng 2018. In case the taxpayer tax returns for the covered taxable period are currently being audited, the conduct of the audit shall be suspended upon the availment of the VAPP while the availment is under evaluation. No? So it shall resume if the availment has been found invalid. No? So if the taxpayer's availment has been determined to be valid, a certificate of the availment shall be issued, and consequently the issued letter of authority, tax verification notice, discrepancy notice, for informal conference, preliminary assessment notice, final assessment notice for pending cases shall be withdrawn and cancelled. No? So, kahit may letter of authority ka na, bayad ka ng VAPP, ika-cancel lahat yung mga findings sa'yo. No? Despite the issuance of certificate of availment, however, the taxpayer's availment shall be rendered invalid and shall be subject to audit or investigation following the prescribed procedures under existing rules and regulations upon prior authorization and approval of the BAR. No? In these instances, when there is strong evidence or findings of under-declaration of sales, receipts, or income, or overstatement of deductions by more than 30% based on a written report of the appropriate revenue official stating the facts with supporting documents. No? Kung may fraudulent yung return nyo, kasi more than 30% ang hindi na-declare, no? Understated. When there is valid verifiable information that the taxpayer has withheld but failed to remit withholding taxes. Ang violation po kasi sa withholding taxes are treated talaga na severe. Why? Kasi hindi pera yun ng taxpayer. Pera yun ng para na sa gobyerno na kinaltas lang niya sa kanyang mga expenses. No? Kaya hindi niya yun pera. Kaya mas mahigpit, mas stricto po yung rules natin sa withholding. Any voluntary payment may be applied against the deficiency tax, if any, that may be assessed against the taxpayer after the audit or investigation. Kung halimbawa, nag-avail na, nagbayad na, pero hindi pala siya qualified, then, pag na-audit siya, yung binayad niya na yun yung i-apply doon sa deficiency. No? Failure to file and pay tax returns. Taxpayers who fail to file tax returns and or pay their taxes for the taxable year 2018 under Section 9A hereof can apply for VAPP provided that the unfiled tax returns shall first be filed and or unpaid taxes plus corresponding penalties for the late filing and payment shall first be paid by the taxpayer. Kasi may mga hindi na i-file na return. So, i-file muna at saka bayaran bago makapag-avail ng voluntary assessment. No? At saka hindi din available under Section 12, hindi rin available yung cash refund or credit, no? Na gagawin. Any payment made under these regulations is construed as a waiver of the taxpayer's right to claim for refund or credit, notwithstanding the collection thereof from an erroneous payment. So, hindi kasama. Hindi mo ma-avail yung cash refund or credit. Section 13, ito na, non-admission of fraud or erroneous payment. So, hindi ibig sabihin na avail po kayo ng voluntary assessment, inaccept nyo na may fraud kayo or may erroneous payment. O hindi ganyan ang ibig sabihin. Ibig sabihin lang, voluntary ito para hindi ka na ma-avail, present ka pa ng mga documents, no, during the audit. So, magbayad ka na lang para hindi ka na ma-audit, magkaroon ka ng clearance. No? So, this is signed by the Secretary of Finance, Carlos G. Dominguez III, and approved by our BIR Commissioner, Cesar Dolay, for the BIR. No? Then we will discuss the application form, itong voluntary assessment and payment program or the VAPP. No? Ito yung BIR form number 2119. Ano siya? Enhance siya noong August 2020. No? Bakit August 2020? Kasi August 2020 lang din talaga ang voluntary assessment program na to and payment, no? So, sa line number 1 natin, anong nakalagay diyan? Return period, no? Return period, date of transaction or date of death, no? So, kung depende yan kung anong inavail nyo. For the calendar year or the fiscal year under the year ended, no? Sino yung pwedeng mag-avail dito? Yung calendar year ending December 31, 2018 at saka yung fiscal year ending June, no? 2019. Number of sheets attached, kung ilan yan, and then the alphanumeric tax code or the ATC, the tax type code, kung ano yung inavail natin, and then the description is voluntary assessment, no? So, part 1, line number 8 is the taxpayer identification number. No? And then the line number 9, RDO code, taxpayer classification, whether individual or non-individual. And then the line of business or occupation. Dito po sa number 11, yung line of business or occupation natin, kopyahin natin yung nandun sa certificate of registration natin or COR. No? Huwag ka tayong gawa ng line of business na hindi kasama doon sa certificate of registration natin. Line number 12 is taxpayer's name, last name, first name, middle name for individual or registered name for individual. No? And then the email address. Trade name, and then the contact number, and then the registered address, and the zip code. No? And then meron na dito sa part 2 yung computation of VAPP and the amount. No? So, line number 18, voluntary tax payable for income tax, VAT, percentage tax, excise tax, documentary stamp tax, other than DST on one-time transaction. No? So, magkano yung amount of tax. And then number 19, voluntary tax payable for withholding tax. No? And then the amount. Voluntary tax payable for taxes on it, amount. And then the total voluntary tax payable. This form is signed under the penalties of perjury. So, dapat dito ang mga nakalagay na mga information are true and correct. No? So, for individual and for non-individual, the signature over printed name of the taxpayer authorized representative and the TIN, no? Designation of the TIN. Non-individual, signature over printed name of president, vice president, authorized officer or representative or the tax agent, indicate title, designation, and TIN. No? And then nakalagay dyan, if tax agent, accreditation number, attorney's roll number, date of issuance, and then the expiry date. No? And then may remarks, complete as to documentary requirements or others. Kasi pagkakulang yung documentary requirements nyo, that can be a ground for non-availment or hindi kayo qualified. No? Check or evaluated by the revenue officer, signature over printed name, and then reviewed by the assistant chief LT office or assistant revenue district officer. No? Signature over printed name approved by chief LT office revenue district officer or signature over printed name. And then there is a stamp of receiving office, date of receipt, and then the revenue officer's signature. No? So, itong 2019, saan po ito i-file natin? Sa office po ng large taxpayer, kung large taxpayer ang mag-a-avail, or kung regular taxpayer sa revenue district office. No? So, ano itong mga schedule? Schedule for income tax, VAT, percentage tax, excise tax, and doc stamp tax other than DST on it. No? Attach additional sheets using the same column or headings if necessary. Okay. So, tax type, income tax, value-added tax, percentage tax, excise tax, DST, other than on it, so equals the total. Tax due, net VAT payable for 2018 at saka 2017. No? So, amount of increase in total tax due, percentage of increase, amount of decrease in total tax due, and the percentage of decrease. So, naka-indicate po dyan. Note, sum of the tax due, net what payable, per tax returns filed and deficiency taxes paid under BIR form number 0605FA. And then we have the computation of voluntary tax payable, no? Dito mismo sa form 2119 nandito siya. No? So particular and then the amount per annual income tax return, no? So gross sales, prescribed percentage, amount or taxable net income, prescribed percentage schedule 4 and then the amounts, higher amounts between item number 13 and number 16 or minimum amount schedule 4. 19, voluntary tax payable item number 17 or number 18, whichever is higher, no? So, sundan lang natin yung mga column, basahin natin yung instruction na kailangan dyan and then fill up natin. Schedule 2 for withholding tax, final and creditable. No? Tax type and then the basic tax paid or remitted. Okay. For taxes on it as estate tax, donor's tax, on it related, CWT, expanded withholding tax, doc stamps, no? Attach additional sheets using the same column headings if necessary. No? So, nakalagay dyan kung anong klaseng tax type and then the basic tax due per accomplished tax return. And then the tax rate is 5%. No? Basis for the computation of voluntary tax amount under Section 9A. No? Ito yun. Net increase of not more than 10%. Amount required voluntary tax payment is 3% of 2018 gross sales or 7% of 2018 taxable net income. Okay. Net increase of more than 10% up to 30%. No, ito yung nandun kanina sa regulation. So, nandito din sa form. Net increase of more than 10% up to 30%, the amount required or voluntary tax payment is 2% of 2018 or 6% of 2018. No? Net increase of more than 30%, 1% of 2018, 5% of 2018 taxable net income. Net increase of not more than 10%, decrease, no? 4% of 2018 and gross sales or 8% of 2018 taxable net income. Net decrease of more than 10% is 5% of 2018 gross sales or 9% of 2018 taxable net income. No? So, ano yung mga minimum amount? Individuals, estates, and trust, 75,000. No? With subscribed capital of more than 50 million, 1 million. With subscribed capital of more than 20 million up to 50 million, 500,000. With subscribed capital of more than 5 million up to 20 million, 250,000. With subscribed capital of 5 million and less than 100,000, other juridical entities, including but not limited to cooperative, foundation, general professional partnership, the payment is 75,000. No? May mga question, Hari? So, yun po yung sa voluntary assessment natin, no? Yun na tayo din aabot dun sa withholding kasi ano na, 9:42 na, no? So, tapusin natin to. Anyway, mahaba-haba pa to, no? Tapusin talaga natin to. Okay. So, may minimum amount, mayroon tayong whichever is higher, no? So, iba-iba yung basis but whichever is higher, no? So, bearer form number 2119, voluntary assessment and payment program, application form guidelines and instructions. So, paano po natin ito fill up, no? Who shall file? Sino po daw yung gagamit nitong BR Form number 2119? Any person, natural or juridical, including estates and trust, liable to pay any internal revenue covering taxable year ending December 31, 2018, and fiscal year ending on last day of the month of July 2018 to June 2019, who due to inadvertence or otherwise erroneously paid his internal revenue tax liabilities or failed to file tax returns, pay taxes, may avail of this voluntary assessment programs pursuant to revenue regulations 21-2020. No? Ito yung revenue regulations niya. Those not eligible for availment. Sino yung hindi available? Yun yung apat na na-discuss natin kanina, no? Sino yung taxpayer na may final assessment notice na, yung may case na sa DOJ, no? Yung may cases na tax fraud, yung with pending tax evasion and other criminal offense hindi kasama. Where to file? The application form together with the complete documentary requirements and bakit ano? Deadline of filing. Putol itong ginawa mo, Arya. Okay. So, deadline of filing, qualified person can avail of the benefit of the VAPP until December 31, 2020. Yun po yung coverage, no? So, ano yung mga documentary requirements natin? Ito yung mandatory requirements natin. Payment form, yung BAR form 0622. And then the additional requirements, file tax returns, proof of payment of taxes paid in 2017 and 2018, and the audited financial statement for covered taxable year. Copy of remittance returns and proof of payment of final and creditable withholding taxes for taxpayers availing of the program. Copy of the duly paid BR Form 0605, stamped either by authorized agent bank, AAB, or revenue collection officer, no? Where the taxpayers registered and proof of payment representing settlement of previous deficiency tax with or without assessment notice, if any. Okay. So, yun po yung paano i-file yung form natin, no? 2119. Okay. Doon na tayo sa BR form 0622, no? Ito yung voluntary assessment and payment program. Ito yung partner ng 2119, no? Kasi ito payment form. Okay. Enhanced also, this form is enhanced August 2020. So let's start with the applicable spaces, no? For line number 1, return period, no? So return period. So since payment form ito, itali nyo doon sa 2119 na form, no? And then we have the calendar year or fiscal year, the year ended, number of sheets attached, alphanumeric tax code, and then the tax type code, no? The description is voluntary assessment. So background information, we have the TIN, we have the name, trade name, registered address. Be sure na same ito doon sa 2119, no? Email address, contact number, and then the zip code. Source of computation. Okay. Self-assessment or per BIR notice. So, VAPP amount, total voluntary tax payable, less voluntary tax paid from previous BIR form equals voluntary tax still due. No? So, yun ang babayaran mo. Then, this is also signed under the penalties of perjury. And then, the details of payment. No? So, yung application form po na fill up natin is yung BIR Form 2119 and then itong payment form na 0622. No? Magka-partner sila. Okay. Yung BIR Form 0622 natin, ano naman po yung guidelines niya in filing, no? So, who shall use this form, no? BIR Form 0622. Who shall use this form? Any person, natural or juridical, including estates and trust, liable to pay any internal revenue taxes covering the taxable year ending December 31, 2018 and fiscal year ending on last day of the month of July 2018 to June 2019, who due to inadvertence or otherwise erroneously paid his or its internal revenue tax liabilities or failed to file tax returns, pay taxes, may avail of the VAPP pursuant to RR number 21-2020. No? So, where to pay? This payment form shall be accomplished in 3 copies, no, sa 3 kopya. LT, large taxpayer, or the RDO. Duplicate for the taxpayer and triplicate for the collecting agent. So, the amount payable shall be paid with the authorized agent bank under the LT office or the RDO having jurisdiction over the taxpayer. So, in places where there are no AEBs, this form shall be filed and the tax shall be paid to the Revenue Collection Officer and Large Taxpayer Office or RDO having jurisdiction over the taxpayer. The RCO shall issue an electronic revenue official receipt, ROR, or manually issued ROR, therefore. So when the form is filed with the AEB, the taxpayer must accomplish and submit BIR prescribed deposit slip, which the bank teller machine validate as evidence that payment was received by the AEB. The AEB receiving the form shall stamp mark with the word received on the form and also machine validate the form as proof of filing and VAPP payment of the taxpayer. The machine validation shall reflect the date of payment, amount paid, and transaction code. The name of the bank, branch code, teller's code, and teller's initial. So bank debit memo number and date should be indicated in the form for taxpayers paying under the bank debit memo. Okay. So for one-time transactions involving sale of real property, this form shall be filed and tax shall be paid with the AAB, RCO under the RDO having jurisdiction over the location of the property. So what are the attachments? For additional payment arising from BIR notice, copy of the said notice to this payment. This form shall cover tax liabilities for one taxable year and or taxable on it for a particular period in 2018. Payment should be in cash as a condition to avail of the privilege. Hence, non-cash mode of payment such as tax debit memo and the like will not qualify as a valid payment. For additional payment per BIR notice, copy of the proof of payment shall be submitted to the concerned LT office or RDO prior to issuance of the certificate of availment. No? So, ito yung ating certificate of availment na ina-avail. So, sino yung pumipirma dito? This is to certify that blank, the name of the taxpayer, with taxpayer identification number, availed of the voluntary assessment and payment program pursuant to revenue regulations number 21-2020 for the following tax types and taxable year period, no? So, tax type, no? Pwedeng income tax, value-added tax, the taxable period, no? By using this certification, the BIR grants the privilege of no audit for the covered overstated tax types and taxable year period, no? So, this certification is issued on the basis of the documents submitted by the taxpayer or his or its duly authorized representative. However, if upon verification the data will be found out to be different of the availment or the availment is not qualified based on Section 10 of RR number 21-2020, then the certification shall be null and void. No? So issue this blank day of ang may pirma, either the Chief Large Taxpayer Office or the Revenue District Officer. No? So, yan po yung mga na-discuss natin on the Voluntary Assessment and Payment Program for taxable year 2018. No? So, tulong na po sa atin to ng gobyerno dahil nga may pandemic. So, binigyan tayo ng option na mag-declare voluntarily para hindi na po tayo ma-audit. No? So, anong na-discuss natin this evening? May shout-out, Hari?
Meron po, ma'am.
O sige, shout-out muna.
Shoutout po kay Miss Ami Oclari.
Okay. Miss Ami, good evening and thank you for watching po.
Tapos, yung username niya, ma'am, Escudo Network.
Okay, so good evening po and shout-out to Escudo Network.
Sabi niya, ma'am, amazing facts.
Oh, amazing facts talaga kasi bakit? Kaya ako, wala akong interpretation dito binabasa ko sa inyo yung tax laws talaga, yung ating batas sa taxation, no? Kaya itong revenue regulations na to, ito po yung pwedeng i-avail ng taxpayer para hindi siya ma-audit yung voluntary assessment and payment program for the taxable year 2018. 2018 lang po ito, hindi kasama yung ibang year, no? Kasi yung 2017 naman and prior years, meron pa naman po tayo doon na amnesty, no? Doon sa deficiency, sa delinquency, at saka meron pa tayong 2 years pa yung amnesty po sa estate tax, no? Hindi pa yan matatapos. Okay, ano pa?
Sabi niya, ma'am, ano po, mag-change daw siya ng business name. Ano daw po maganda, trading or general merchandise?
Yung trading, ano yan, yung parang nagtitrade ka, no? Pero pagka general merchandise, lahat. So, depende kung ano ba talaga ang nature ng business mo. Kung iba-iba, kasi minsan yung trading parang isang, ano lang yan, isang commodity lang, tin-trade mo. Pero kung general merchandise, marami kang items, no? Na binibenta. So, kung marami, general merchandise ang gamitin mo. Pero kung isa lang, halimbawa, nagtitrading ka ng sugar, trading ang gamitin mo, no? Na business name. Pero kung marami, lagay mo na general merchandise.
Tapos, shoutout po kay Sunshine Lay Arcilia.
Okay.
Good evening po.
Shout out is Sunshine Arcelia, no?
Saka po, sabi po ni Miss Rihanna San Agustin, ang sipag ni ma'am, salute. Good evening.
Thank you po. Thank you. Ito na lang yung ano natin parang serbisyo din po sa taxpayer, no? At the same time, binigyan tayo ng facilities po ng YouTube. Kaya thank you din po sa YouTube.
Shout out din po kay Sir Sherwin Fernandez.
Okay, shout out Sherwin Fernandez. Thank you for watching.
Wala na po, ma'am.
Okay? So, what we got this evening, yung una po natin na diniscuss sa inyo, yung tungkol sa withholding, no, sa compensation. So, yung withholding tax on compensation, sino po yung required dyan na mag-withhold? It is always the employer, no? So, sino ma-penalize pag hindi nag-withhold? The employer. But there are cases also na kasalanan din ng employee na hindi siya na-withhold. Yun nga yung una noon na hindi siya nagbibigay ng certificate of exemption niya, especially yung ilan yung anak niya, pero noon pa yon. But under the train law, irrelevant na po yon, no? So, wala nang problema ang employer kasi hindi na din siya manghihingi ng certificate of employment because hindi na, ano yung mga exemption, hindi na kailangan. Why? Kasi because of the 250,000 na zero rate po yung ating tax rate doon sa first 250,000. So, mataas na. So, bali, yung mga exemption na yun, natabunan na lahat because yung exempt portion is 250,000. So, hindi na po kailangan. No? And then, yung isa pa na nakikita ko na problema sa compensation, yun yung pagbigay ng certificate na 2316. No? And then, yung pag-year-end adjustment. Ano yung year-end adjustment? Ito yung gagawin mo na tax due equals tax withheld. Kung may na-over-withhold ka during the year, i-refund mo yung over-withholding mo or i-carry forward mo for the next 3 months. No? Doon mo gagamitin. Or, sa pag-year-end adjustment naman, no? So, ang gagawin natin dyan, pagka nag-alanganin ka na December ka pa mag-year-end adjustment, ang gagawin mo, earlier, no? It can be, mag-annualize ka na, starting October or November. Para, halimbawa, malaki pa yung ikakaltas mo sa employee, hindi maubos yung sweldo niya pagdating ng December. No? Kaya earlier, mag-annualize na po tayo. Yun yung mga ina-advise ko sa iba. At isa pa pala na kasama dito sa withholding tax on compensation, ito yung mga nag-aabil ng substituted filing, no? Pagka isang employer lang during the year, qualified na po kayo to substituted filing. Ang income tax return nyo, yun na lang 2316, hindi na kayo kailangan mag-file ng income tax return, no? Pero kung meron kayong multiple employer during the year, kailangan nyo mag-file. Kahit na sabihin mo pa na yung main employer nyo tax due equals tax withheld, di pa rin kayo qualified ng non-filing or ng substituted filing. Ang gagawin nyo, mag-file talaga kayo yung mga certificate, no? So, kung ilan yung employer nyo during the year, 3 yan, 4, yung 4 na certificate na yan, i-file ninyo sa income tax return nyo na 1,700 and then file po natin sa BAR, no? Hindi tayo qualified doon sa substituted filing. Okay? Sino ang mape-penalize? It's always the employer. Kaya ang employer dapat din po na mag-ingat. Kailan niya dapat ibigay yung over-withholding niya? At the time na December, no, yung year-end. Or kung nag-resign ang employee niya before the year ends, at the time ng last day of payment of salary, ibigay na rin niya yung na-over-withhold niya na taxes, no? Parang doon na siya nag-year-end adjustment. Okay, so mas mahigpit po yung batas natin sa withholding, especially yung non-remittance or non-payment po ng withholding na hindi ni-remit ng employer sa BIR, mas mahigpit po dyan. Although, kasama din po siya sa amnesty, no? Sa amnesty doon sa 2017 and prior, basic na lang ang babayaran. Pero dito sa 2018, may penalty pero maliit lang, no? So, mag-avail na kayo ng voluntary assessment program. And this is only up to December 31, 2020. At yung covered niya na taxable year is 2018. No? So, yun lang po yung na-discuss natin ngayon about withholding and then about the voluntary assessment and payment program. Siguro yung revenue regulations na hinanda din namin, ito yung 11-2018, nandito yung mga bagong rates ng expanded withholding tax. Next week na po natin, no? Sa next na live streaming po natin i-discuss. Okay, so may question pa, Hari? Okay, so thank you for watching, mga ka-YouTubers natin. Thank you very much. Thank you din po sa YouTube. So, sa Facebook natin, no? Thank you very much for watching and hope na pagbigay po kami sa inyo ng additional information and may guide po tayo, no, when we file our tax returns. And Also, kung mag-avail po kayo ng voluntary assessment and payment program for the taxable year 2018. No, good evening and thank you sa mga subscribers natin. Sa mga hindi pa nag-subscribe, please subscribe to our channel and we promise to bring you more information about tax. Thank you and let's call it a night.